So I'm Heather Kelly. I'm a plant pathologist at University of Tennessee, actually stationed at the West Tennessee Research and Education Center over in Jackson. So I'm going to be talking about target spot and what we've learned, and particularly just focusing on Tennessee data. But as usual, being a plant pathologist, I always like to throw out my Plant Pathology 101 to understand what I do and how we interpret things for diseases. And essentially, this is my slide to my growers and everyone else, because the whole thing is, when is disease going to be a pest? When is it going to be an epidemic and cause yield loss? You can actually use PEST as an acronym to remember the 4 factors that have to come together for yield loss to occur. And so that ties into our disease triangle or pyramid. So P, you have to have the pathogen present. That's going to be influenced by your field history, location, as well as then you have to have the right environment, E. So most pathogens like it wet and humid and hot, but there are a couple that like it dry. So you have to have the right environment though. You have to have a susceptible host, knowing your variety. And then lastly, T for time. You might have those first 3 factors, but if they happen late enough in the season, in particular say with target spot, it's not going to affect the yield. It might just be knocking off those leaves that you want to defoliate anyways. And so you really have to make sure you're taking in consideration these 4 factors to know whether you are going to have a yield loss and or need to take action to avoid that yield loss. And so talking about yield loss, this is 5 years of the U.S. cotton estimates for disease losses. This is across all the specialists like myself. Each state take our best estimate of what certain diseases, the percent loss of each year. The reason I put this up here, this green line is nematodes, this orange line is our target spot, and then we have this blue line for bacterial blight, just to give you reference, to really let you know while I'm talking about target spot today, because we can in season do something about them, nematodes have been and will continue to be one of the #1 yield robbers when it comes to pathogens in cotton. And so really make sure you know your nematodes, get your soil tested. You don't know if you're losing yield to nematodes or not unless you're getting your soil tested. So make sure you do that, and then always usually your best management option is to rotate to a non-host, if that's an option, and then you have your seed treatments and in-furrow applications. But I'm going to be talking about target spot. As you can see, we had an uptick in 2016. I'll reference back to slightly. But again, putting that PEST acronym, what are the factors you need to consider when you're thinking about target spot? So it's a fungal pathogen. It survives in the debris. So if you saw it one year, there's a good chance if you're going back to that same field, you could see it again. Environment, it likes it humid and wet and hot. It's going to start in the lower canopy after the canopy closes. Very rarely, if ever, would you see target spot unless your canopy is already closed. Susceptible host. All varieties are susceptible, but there's varying levels of susceptibility. And then time. The earlier this disease develops, or the earlier you see it in the season, the greater potential it has for yield loss. But again, it's also still going to depend upon your other factors on that yield loss. So some of the factors that do increase your risk for target spot, we know that no-till or strip-till, again because it overwinters on the debris, increases your risk. Frequent showers and or irrigation, and really with that I'm going to really say it's about canopy drying out. You have a bunch of rain events, but right after the rain event you have it turn out nice and sunny and it dries out that canopy. Target spot's not going to develop near as quickly as if you have a bunch of overcast days where that canopy never dries out. High nitrogen fertility, narrow row spacing, all of those, again, it's building that right microclimate in the canopy for disease to really explode. Similar rank growth, and again, your field history and your variety all play a role in that target spot. And so how to differentiate between foliar spots. So target spot's not the only foliar spot we get in cotton. We get a lot of other ones that do not respond to foliar fungicides, and you need to manage completely different. And so Cotton Incorporated has a really good publication, again, that all the cotton pathologists work together on. All I did was kind of take that guide and make it into a user-friendly interactive site on your phone, guide.utcrops.com. If you go to the cotton and then pick foliar diseases, this is what you'll see. And the first link is actually an interactive key, again, that was developed by the plant pathologists. And you just answer this couple questions that will lead you to what's most likely the spots you are looking at your field. And so again, that first factor, making sure you're dealing with target spot. That's the first thing you do have to make sure you're dealing with, and not a different leaf spot. And so here's a resource to help you do that. And so getting into now the data. So in Tennessee, target spot was first reported in the fall of 2013 on cotton for the first time. So starting in 2014, I started timing trials. We knew it could respond to fungicides, but when was maybe the best time to put out those fungicides? And so we looked at just Preaxar at 4 fluid ounces per acre. All these trials, at least the first, well, the last ones, the first 2 here, we used multiple varieties. And so the timing we looked at either a first week of bloom, a third week of bloom, or a 5th week of bloom. And then we did either single or double applications. And that was either a first week followed by a 3rd week, or a 3rd week followed by a 5th week. And then in 2015 and 16, I added what are called IPM timings. So once you saw the lesions in the field, you would put out your first application, and then the double IPM would be, then you would follow that application up 2 weeks later with a second application. And so then 2014 through 19, I've done additional trial work that's just been looking at product efficacy. And so I'll go into that last. And again, looking at products, again, either being put out as a single or a double application. And then most recently, a regional trial where we've been looking at from 17 through 2019, canopy management incorporated into understanding, can we use better canopy management to reduce target spot disease, defoliation, and also protect our yield. I'm not going to go into the results of this, but just from Tennessee's data, while we did significantly impact height of our plants based on variety and canopy management did not impact target spot development and or yield loss associated with target spot. So unfortunately, at least Tennessee's data did not look like a low versus aggressive canopy management, which only with the difference was 24 fluid ounces versus 48 fluid ounces. That was our low versus high, or low versus aggressive canopy management. We did not see a difference in our target spot due to canopy management, which was surprising. I thought we really could possibly do that because we maybe could change that micro canopy there, but that was not the case. And so getting into timing. So again, the main take-home point, factors that influence our percent defoliation is what I'm going to focus on, because that's what's been correlated to the yield loss from target spot. Because you might see less spots in one variety, but that's because all the leaves have already fallen off the lower canopy where those spots would be. And when we do look at our ratings for target spot, the actual lesions versus defoliation, and then our resulting yield, the strongest correlation is between the percent defoliation and our yield. And so I'm just going to be talking about percent defoliation and then our final yield. So year, as expected, and variety had an impact on yield, and as well as fungicide, timing, and product. And so that's where I'm going to focus on, is showing you some data and giving you the take-home points from those trials. So again, 2014 through 16 specifically, I was trying to get at, well, what is the best timing in Tennessee specifically to control target spot? And so this is across the 3 years, and remember, it varied by year because year was significant. But on average, here you have, let me set the graph up for you. These bars represent the percent defoliation and correlate to the left-hand axis. The line is our yield and lint, corresponds to our right-hand axis. Our NTC, that's non-treated check, so no fungicide was applied. This is then our timing, so 3rd week of bloom, our IPM timing, 1 shot when we first saw the lesions, 1st week followed by 3rd week, 1st week of bloom only, 5th week of bloom only, our double shot of our IPM, and 3rd week of bloom followed by 5th week of bloom. And so the letters represent statistical separation. So here you can see everything statistically reduced our defoliation. But when we look at yield, the only timing that's statistically separated from our non-treated check was our 3rd week followed by our 5th week. Although that 3rd week followed by 5th week did not statistically differentiate or didn't differ from these these 5 treatments here. So again, you can see that the later applications in general is the take-home message here. The later applications in Tennessee from 14 to 16 had better in protecting our yield compared to some of the earlier timings. And then here's just again looking at now I've incorporated additional data for the last 3 years. So this data is interesting because really you have to dive much more into it to understand it year by year. Because again, you have to remember 2014 was only the 2nd year we had this disease in Tennessee in cotton. So our inoculum was really just starting to build up compared to say 16, which was our really, really big year of target spot in cotton because it had been building up in our fields and we had a lot of rainy days with overcast days that the canopy didn't dry out. And so while this is just the overall summary, when you break it apart by year, the timing did somewhat vary by year, but really the take-home is later in the year, the later the applications have the trend to do better in protecting yield for timing. And then single versus double. Going out with a single shot versus a double shot of a fungicide. And so here again, I've incorporated additional years, the last 3 years and not just the first 3 years essentially. And again, while this is just Tennessee data, regional data from 2014 through 16 actually showed less a difference between our single and double application. And really that a well-timed single application can protect yield. And so really again, where statistically that line again is your yield, and it only is statistically different our non-treated check to our double, but again our double is not statistically different from our single. And this is where if you put economics behind this and the difference between these two and the amount of money though in putting out that second application, you might only be breaking even on that second application versus putting out only the single. Again, both statistically reduce your defoliation, but really, the bottom line is protecting your yield.
And the single application was applied when? 3rd week?
So this is because it's cumulative.
Okay.
This is multiple different timings for that single. But if I pulled out just the 3rd week versus the 3rd plus 5th week of bloom, it's a very exact similar trend, but the statistics aren't as strong for it because there's less data points. And so then coming forward, make sure I'm not going too fast or too slow. I probably could slow down a little bit. These are right now all the products that are labeled in cotton for target spot. So you've got headline, Preaxar, and so headline is just one component, pyraclostrobin, and that same component is in Preaxar, but Preaxar then has a second component in it, an SDHI. And what we're finding is these SDHIs do seem to have better efficacy on the target spot pathogen. My graduate student that's in the room has actually been screening isolates for fungicide insensitivity or resistance, and we found the lowest EC50 values, essentially the lowest concentration to kill or reduce 50% of this pathogen are with the SDHIs. That's the fluoxapyrax that's in Preaxar, as well as then Mervis Top has a new SDHI called Adepidin in it. Those two in particular we've tested and they have the lowest EC50 values on the isolates we've tested, which is really good. And Mervis Top again though is a combination product. It has that SDHI in it plus a DMI, a triazole that has very good efficacy also. And so we highly recommend the combination products. So it's good fungicide resistance management. Because also with my students' project is we are finding some insensitivities and or resistant isolates to some of our other classes, in particular our QOIs, our strobilurins. And so we definitely want to be mindful of that and be using multiple modes of action when we're going out in cotton when we need to. Amstar Top is labeled, but I doubt it's really Mervis Top is going to be probably more promoted than Amstar Top. It's really kind of just a Quadris Top. And then you just again have Quadris, which is azoxystrobin. And so there's a lot of generic azoxystrobins out there that could also be used. Then there's Approach and Delero. Top Guard, you're getting into just some of the straight triazoles here, where Top Guard EQ though, again, is a combination of a triazole and a QOI. And then you just have your tebuconazole products I just put out there because there are a lot of generic tebuconazole products with multiple different names. And so then the different rates you have out there for them. And so from my research, I'm going to show you just 2 snapshots of 2 trials out of 2 different years next. But essentially, of these products that I've tested, the ones that have had the most consistent in protecting yield in Tennessee have been Headline, Preaxar, Merivis Top, and in particular, again, these combination products right here, and then TopGuard EQ. But it's been interesting that the TopGuard has not looked as well in some of our other states. It just so happens Tennessee and maybe one other location, I can't think of which one it is at the top of my head, did see some advantage with TopGuard EQ. So there might be some differences in populations out there. But again, in particular, mixed mode of action is what we would recommend. And so some data to follow up with that. This is 2017. Just to show and be fair to all comparisons, all of these were just put out 1 shot at 5th week of bloom. And so you don't see any letters here because there was no statistical difference between these. But it is one that showed a pretty strong trend, and that you would almost expect there to be statistical differences going from a non-treated check of 1426 to 1665. But again, there was just a lot of variation in these plots. And so you actually didn't get the statistical separation. But again, you have your Merivis Top and your TopGuard EQ, but then you also have the headline behind it. And essentially everything did do better than our non-treated check. And then in 2019, we also then did get separation in our yield. So here we've got, I've put the percent defoliation in bars and our yield on the line again. Again, you know, some variation in our percent defoliation. We're really only, this Provost Silver at 2 shots significantly reduced defoliation, but really didn't protect our yield at all, versus our Merivis Top application at 3rd week of bloom and then our double application. Those were really the best at reducing that defoliation. But when you look at the yield, really it was the Merivis Top as well as at the double shot, as well as the single shot at 5th week of bloom, as well as the Preaxar at the 5th week of bloom, you know, were our top yielders here. So again, those SDHIs that are in those products, it matches very well when we take this pathogen out of the field and we put it in a Petri dish and we're putting it at different doses of this SDHI compared to the QOI components and the triazole components. Now we're looking at that they do have the best efficacy, so it makes sense that in the field we're also seeing that. So kind of to summarize the consistency of yield impact though, so based on regional trial data from 2014 to 16, this is regional data now, which was 15 site years, 4 to 6% yield protection was observed. And so again, that's regionally. And so I like that because it takes into consideration a lot of different environmental parameters as well as different pathogen populations. But it was dependent upon disease pressure, environment, timing of fungicide, and variety if you needed a fungicide application and if you actually got that yield protection. So again, it always just goes back to that disease pyramid and understanding when you need to take action and put out a fungicide. And again, later timed application, waiting to see lesions and understanding your weather events coming forward and what had just passed provides the most consistent yield protection or the most consistent probability of needing a fungicide and getting a yield response. And so, again, I kind of summarized this in the past one, but know your pathogens. Again, just to recap to still, don't forget about your soil, know what's in there, identify your diseases and pathogens. Again, utilize our guide.utcrops.com as needed to help you identify what you're seeing in the field. That's really your first step. Be aware of your weather and know your variety. And then take into consideration the growth stage you're at, as well as then the input costs, as well as then what is your end price you're getting, which is what Steve North is going to talk about next. Because really, without knowing some of this, you're kind of in the dark knowing whether you can really invest in a fungicide or not. So with that, I thank you for your attention. I think I'm somewhat on time. I'll take a question if we have one now, and if we have time at the very end too, I can take more questions. But are there any questions?
You were talking about your PICS application, your Mepquat applications. You said 24 or 40 versions. Is that seasonal or is that one-time
No,
applications?
so the low one that was 24 was split across 2 different applications of 16 and 8, starting at Pinhead Square and then 3 weeks later. And then the 48 ounces, that was split across 3 different applications, again starting at Pinhead Square and doing 3 weeks after.
Of course, 48 is actually the maximum label. So
Yeah, and that's why 48 was
we
our
know that's
aggressive.
not necessarily what everybody's putting on, but.
Yeah, but we wanted to stick to label, and so that's what we did. So it would be interesting if the label changed and or if we tried higher levels, would we get a response? But it was interesting because really the number of nodes didn't change, but the height of the plant changed. So if you think of it, you're condensing those nodes down, you might actually be creating an environment that's just as well for the target spot to develop as one that's more spaced out. And so again, that gets back to varieties. The varieties that we have seen that seem to have less target spot, we still don't always know if that's genetic or if that's more just canopy structure. And it allows for more airflow, there's less leaf litter there anyways to cause that microclimate for it.
We've seen with later application, our whole lot increases. Have you seen that?
So a later application of fungicide and you've seen more boll rot?
That we see more bull rot because we're keeping a lot of leaves in the lower canopy.
Oh, I've not seen that in mine. In 2018, in particular, we took boll rot ratings in our fungicide trials because we had all that late rain in September. We had a lot of boll rot, so I wanted to see, did any of the fungicides actually protect or, like you said, maybe increase boll rot? But we had no differences. And so, you know, replicated small plots, that's how it fell out. Sometimes it just might be certain fields, certain areas in particular. And really, most of the time when you're putting out the fungicide, it's not going to help avoid the boll rot later on because it's just not going to last that long. But it would be worrisome if it's creating more of the environment for boll rot. But at least in our situation, that was not what we found.